So I'm really excited that Susie Hill is here with us today. She is the inevitable success coach, and she's going to be talking to us about how to harness your inner champion. When Susie came to me and asked, what topics would be best for our audience, I just thought, the idea of understanding what it takes to be a champion, I think is just something that we have to continuously focus on and understand. So I'm super excited that I have Susie here, who is an expert in this field, an expert in coaching people towards success. So welcome, Susie. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to do this with you. And I love the vision and purpose you have behind Blue Lotus Films, and especially this video vitamin series, because I think there's a lot of takeaways people and insights people can have from our conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and I know we met through Tiffany Scott, who has also been on this interview series / podcast. And I really appreciate that Tiffany hooked us up, first of all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she's awesome. And I've actually had it on my mind since I've interviewed her. I've always, sort of really been interested in branding. So just want to mention that, at some point, the video vitamin, I really like the name, but lately I've been thinking that it might need to change just for, the purposes of distribution, having people be able to find it on iTunes doesn't make so much sense to call it a video vitamin. So just want to mention that in case anyone is listening, like a year down the road, we might, the name might be evolving.
Well, Tiffany Scott is the person to work with. She's a fantastic branding expert, and I worked with her this year over a 6-month time period to really suss out my coaching practice and my vision, and to align what I do with my core values. And that is one thing that Tiffany has a real skill in doing. So this is a shameless endorsement for Tiffany, because she's not only a great friend of mine, but she's very talented, and you can't go wrong working with her. You're in good hands, and you really are able to get to, I was able to get to, some of the most important things that I do, and how that came out in how I work with my clients.
Awesome.
All through branding.
All right.
So talk about the harnessing your inner champion.
Yes, I'm excited. Well, let me read your bio. I would love to introduce Susie Hill, introduce you to everyone, Susie. So Susie Hill is an insightful coach, drawing out the uniqueness in her clients, which evokes clear choices and forward-minded strategies. With over 25 years of business, information technology, and professional development experience, she brings a broad understanding of leading and coaching professionals, coupled with authentic, effective communication skills. Her clients appreciate the warmth and encouragement she brings, as well as her lighthearted humor and optimism. Susie holds a Master of Business Administration from the University of Tennessee and a BA in Marketing from Manchester University, where she competed nationally in women's cross country. She is also a registered yoga teacher, having completed her training at the Glowing Body Yoga Studio under guidance of program director and Iyengar yoga teacher Cindy Dollar. Her core values include insight, wisdom, integrity, and passion. Susie's dual background of corporate experience and professional development work has given her the distinct advantage of blending the bridge between mindfully managing and navigating the business world. So I think that based on all of your experience, Susie, everyone is really looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us today about being a champion. Let's start off talking about, you have this extensive background in IT and in the corporate business world. What made you interested in going into coaching as a profession?
20 years ago, I met a man named Thomas Leonard. And Thomas Leonard is the founder of modern day coaching. I was in my 20s at the time, so I'm aging myself a bit. But I went through like a 4-week course with him. It was free at the time. And he was in the process of creating or developing the first professional coaching program in the country. And I was really blown away. You know, I had already graduated from undergraduate. I knew I wanted to be in business, but I wanted to do something more. And I didn't want to go back to university. Excuse me, I'm hearing a bit of an echo.
Okay.
So I didn't want to go back to university to get a master's in psychology. So I thought coaching is something that appeals to me. There's a mind-body connection. There's a mind. Some type of way of being that I didn't see in the business world. And I thought, this brings that. So I knew I was not old enough to coach because I was only my late time. I didn't have enough life experience. I didn't have enough business experience. And so I thought, I'm going to coach at some point. So I followed Thomas Leonard over time, and he unfortunately died several years ago of a massive heart attack. But he's left this legacy. And what he also did was start the International Coach Federation, which is the governing body for coaching. So I knew over the time of doing my own personal development, my own spiritual path, my own professional work. At some point, I would coach. And so, the time came after I had all that experience, after I got a master's degree, it was time to coach. And in between that time, I had hired coaches, I had worked with coaches, I had selected a couple of mentors that were coaches, and developed those skills. And then what happened was I started using those in the corporate world. And even though I was in technology, I'm a real people person.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had somebody say to me, you're a real personality. Which is unusual for someone in the technology world, and refreshing for business people, for someone to have a skill set like mine, a very technical mind, but a very empathetic, connecting business mind, and be able to connect with them and really work with them. So that was the inspiration. Is meeting the guy that started coaching. And seeing what was possible with that.
Great. And so you also, interestingly, had a background in sports. So you were an athlete. Yes. Can you tell us about that experience?
Of course. The athlete part goes back to when I was about 13. In fact, it was around the time, that was the lead up. Well, thinking about when the '84 Olympics were here in Los Angeles. I was interested in running. And I ran. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, because I'm getting some real feedback here. Anyway, I ran. I interested in track and field. and I got interested in athletics. And there was something about watching the runner and the grace of a runner and the gait and the vision and the commitment and the dedication it was required to fulfill a goal.
Mm-hmm.
And so that carried forward, and I was running track and field and running period when I was 12, 13, 14, and then I entered high school, and I happened to join the high school girls cross-country team, and we ended up being one of the winningest high school teams in the state of Ohio, because that's where I grew up, and ran in the state championships.
Cool.
And that was at the time, you know, I was in high school at the time, and what was going on was the '84 Olympics. So there was Joan Benoit, who was a marathoner. There was Carl Lewis, who was a sprinter. There was I'm seeing the woman, I cannot remember her name, but I, you know, followed running just religiously and aspired to all of these world-class athletes and couldn't get enough of it. And, you know, fortunately, I had some very good coaches along the way. So that carried over. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I said, I want to run. I don't know that I can qualify for a Division I university team, but I could run for a Division III university team, much smaller school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up running in college, in university, and made it to the national championships for Division III, and I did that 2 years. One as a team, and once as a team, I believe, and once I qualified individually.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow.
So that, you know, and then I've continued, and then over time, when my body had enough of the pounding of pavement, I switched to cycling, and I was riding my bike. And then I wanted another form of movement that was my level of intensity changed. My interest in the level of intensity changed. And that's when I moved to yoga.
Yes.
So it's gone from basketball and running to cycling to yoga. And now I walk. Haven't ridden my bike as much, but walk and do yoga.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of experience in the sports world in trying to reach a certain goal. I think yoga has a whole other approach. It's a very different approach than other types of sports. But it sounds like you understood the importance of having a coach, you know, to, you know, get to these national championships, for instance. So I wonder if you could share with us, you know, how that sports experience has influenced your interest in being a coach in the business world.
Sure. It's funny you say that, because actually I was inducted into my high school Hall of Fame in April. My coach and 20 of the women now, they were girls then. But one of the things that happened was my high school cross-country coach, who was one of the most important, has been and is one of the most important people in my life, he said, how do you do this coaching thing? It's not sports. So your question is so appropriate and timely in all this. How does it translate? What is the connection? What is the correlation?
Yeah.
You know, my discussion about how to harness your inner champion. So when it comes to athletics, especially whether it's an individual sport, you know, like tennis, or a team sport, like cycling or soccer or football or basketball, it starts with a vision, and a vision of where you want to go and what you want to accomplish. And to get there, it requires one to hold on to that vision and to get people to hold on to that vision with you. That's the same in business. It's the same in whether it's a startup or a large corporation or a solopreneur or anything you might want to take on. Is it starts with a vision, a picture of this is what I'm after. So the other piece, there's other pieces that translate are being able to stay committed. So if you're going for that vision, there's a commitment that's being made. Okay. And I shared this with someone recently. We were talking about this topic of harnessing your inner champion and how the connection is. So when I was training as an athlete, especially when I was training to go to the national championships when I was in college, in undergrad, there was really about 4 things that I did, and that was it. I prioritized. I studied because I was in college. I trained, I ate right, and I slept. That's it. That's all I did. There was nothing else. And so I had to prioritize. You know, I had a vision. I prioritized what was most important for me to focus on, because not only was I running and training, but and going after that vision, but I was also, getting a degree, getting a university degree. So that had to be a priority. So it was train, study, eat right, health, and sleep. And that's all I did. Train, study, eat, sleep. That's it. So there's a real commitment there. Now, I had that internally, but I also had a support system around me. Same thing happens in business, having a support system. That's where a coach can come in the business world, or a life coach. So what we're talking about there is the client having a vision, you having a vision, prioritizing what is most important, moving away things that are not priority that move you toward that vision. That's really, really important. And then having a level of accountability. So my accountability of an athlete was, going to training every day, making sure I got my training runs in, my weight training, my flexibility training, my mental training, with actions in the business world is the accountability. And by the way, I was recording, I had to go every day and log every mile I ran, every workout I put in, meetings with the coach. How am I doing? Race strategy. So that's what happens with the business coach, especially when I work with my clients, is we talk about what's the vision, what are the priorities, because sometimes my clients don't have any idea what they need to prioritize or how they need to prioritize. So we look at that. We work on any blocks that need to be moved, okay? And then we focus in on what are the priorities. And then we craft our plan. We have a training program as an athlete. There's an action plan that happens with my client or anyone I work with that moves them toward that vision.
Yes.
So, and it requires a real internal awareness so that when their priority is, writing for let's say they're going to publish an article, and they have friends that say, hey, come on, we're going to go to happy hour.
Yeah.
And they've made a time commitment as to when they're going to get that article done. And they go, come on, we're going to go to happy hour. They have to look, okay, priority here. What's my vision? What's my commitment? Where's my accountability?
Yeah.
So each week when I work with my clients, because I have weekly sessions with my clients, one of the things that I do is they fill out an accountability report. And so every week they send that to me prior to our call. So we start looking at that. Now, if they miss the mark, it's going to happen. Because we're human. So what we do is we work through that. And we say, so you missed the mark. What happened? How do you get back on track?
Yeah.
Not only that, how do you not beat up on yourself? Because you can sabotage yourself, which we don't want to do that. But it happens.
It happens.
So how do we
work through that?
But how do we
But
get
how
back
do we
on
get
track?
back on track?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So all of those things are part
of
there's a champion,
in us.
There's a
There's a harnessing of that energy, harnessing of that vision,
that movement forward.
Yeah.
And it takes
a
specific look. And each path and each
training program
is different for every client.
Yeah.
The process is the same. It's just going to look a little different for each person because it's unique to each person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that you emphasize the accountability. I mean, it seems like that is, one of the key strengths of having a coach is having that accountability. I think so many entrepreneurs, as I'm sure you've seen, start out with that passion and start out with going after something they love to do. And that's absolutely essential. But there's so much more that is involved in, getting over those hurdles, which, are going to come inevitably. So what have you seen? What you talk about the 3 hurdles, from what I understand, that we need to be prepared for. And what are those 3 hurdles that we can overcome so we don't end up feeling stuck?
Fantastic question. Yes, talk about those. So one is accountability. That's a tough one for people. And so having an accountability partner, you're ultimately making a commitment to yourself, but having someone that can hold you accountable and say, hey, did you make it? And if they didn't, okay, so what happened? How do you get back on track? So having an accountability partner that's there, that's supporting you, that's walking beside you, that you can check in with. So accountability, and that's a biggie. And then can encourage you and can help you figure out where did you miss the mark and how do you get back on track? How do you pull that arrow back and shoot again and go for it again? The other one is learning about how we self-sabotage ourselves and knowing what to do with that. Because we all have an inner critic, the saboteur, you name it, the accuser, the part of the reactive mind. So it's how do you work with that? And having the tools to notice when you get stuck with the inner critic, how do you move through that and move forward? So it's just like on track when someone is jumping hurdles, there's a pace in which you're going to see those. So you have to know how to go over each one. And sometimes the back foot, when you go over a hurdle, might hit the hurdle and knock it over. Fair enough. You get to do it again because the next hurdle's coming. You just go over it and you practice.
Wow.
The third thing is about having a personal practice to keep you focused. And that's really important. So it can be, you use meditation. It can be and this comes more from my practice of yoga, because yoga requires the mind and the body to work and the breath to work in sync. So you have a practice that you come to every day, and it may mean you sit down for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, an hour of your choosing, and you spend time on reviewing your goals, doing meditation if you want, writing. Some people like to write. Some people like to sit and reflect. They might listen to music. Some people may go on a walk. The practice can be, the daily practice has to do with how do you set your mind and prepare your mind for the day and the movement forward.
Yeah.
And, just like an athlete, they practice every day. We need to have some form of personal practice that gets us centered and continue to see our vision and knowing what our priorities are and moving forward in our actions. So accountability, working with self-sabotage and know how to work with that and move through that, jumping over that hurdle when we hit it, even when we hit it. And then some form of personal practice that keeps us focused, it keeps us sharp, it gives us clarity, so that we prime ourselves and set ourselves up for success.
That's brilliant. I love the way that you just broke out those 3 hurdles that everyone, it seems like at some point, is going to face all 3 of those during their entrepreneur journey. And it's interesting to sort of, focus, just, kind of bring out the elephant in the room and say, these 3 hurdles are going to come up over and over. So why not develop a solid practice and a solid way of dealing with them in the same way that an athlete is training their body to be strong for a marathon, or, a basketball player developing their aim in the basket, or,
Sure.
Lots of different ways we can think of athletes training for certain goals. And yeah, I just think it's brilliant to think of it in that simple way of like, if I'm gonna be an entrepreneur, I need to have a way of navigating through these 3 hurdles, because I think so often, and I'd be curious to hear, your extensive experience working with different coaching clients, where, there can be a sort of naivete of like, I love what I do, I'm just going to keep going and I'll figure out a way. But often I think people are not developing the skills they need to overcome hurdles, and then all of a sudden they might hit a wall, or they might, come across some big disaster. We've heard so many stories of entrepreneurs experiencing big failures, bankruptcy, etc. Many different things can happen in people's personal lives that, get them wayside. So I'd be curious to hear, what you see as, the experience. What happens when people start to focus on those 3 areas?
Sure. It's a fantastic question. I'm thinking through a number of things as you asked this.
Yeah, that was a mouthful.
Oh, it's good though. It's good. You're bringing out the many challenges and things that need considerations that need to happen as an entrepreneur. I see a number of entrepreneurs that spend long hours working, and starting a business and running a business, it can have a life of its own. It's almost like raising a child, but when you think about a mother raising a child, especially as a baby, there's a lot of hours that the child is awake, and they wake up, especially a newborn, and they wake up in the middle of the night, and moms can be sleep deprived at times.
Yep.
I see that sleep deprivation with entrepreneurs. If the entrepreneur is not going to take care of their well-being, they're not going to have a business that they can take care of. Mm-hmm. They've got to manage their self-care. They develop a personal practice and dealing with self-sabotage. Those are parts of self-care. And that is so important. And that's one of the things that transitioning from a corporate job and being in the corporate world for over 20 years and into entrepreneurship, and I've been in and out of entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. And that's just because of the range of opportunities I had, because I did consulting, and then I was working full time, and then consulting on the side, and so on.
Yep.
But I had to really learn to transition, because with an a typical corporate job, there's a set number of hours that you would work. You're expected to work 40 hours in most cases. With an entrepreneur, it can be, you might work 12 hours in one day, but where do you manage the self-care? Where does one manage the self-care in that? Are you getting enough nutrition, nourishment? Are you getting enough exercise? Are you taking breaks from technology? That's one of the things that I suggest as a personal practice is, at some point, we are so used to this and getting up and checking the phone in the morning as soon as we get up. I mean, as soon as we wake up, how many people take their phone while they're in bed and check email?
Right.
There's something about all those electronics around our body that doesn't give us opportunity to really rest. So one of those things around a personal practice is shutting things off. I suggest, 8 o'clock at night, that you turn off all technology and you get away from it, because it's a time suck, so to speak. That's taking away from you getting a break from all of that all that technology, because we're inundated. We're checking Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat and all that stuff. And, we're just, and it's affecting our brains. I mean, there's studies now showing what's happening with our brains being affected and our attention span changing. Yeah. So that's going to impact focus. So to go back to your question, what are some things entrepreneurs need to think about? I think these are 3 that I'm suggesting that you can take from athletics. But being self-aware and setting boundaries with technology, with your time. That's something about managing, prioritizing time. I wouldn't say managing time, but prioritizing time is really being thoughtful and committed to, as much as you are growing a business, as an entrepreneur is growing a business, be just as committed to taking care of yourself and your well-being. I see that that's an area where things can really slip. With some of my clients, I coached someone in Tennessee. He's a business owner. This has been 2 years ago. Fantastic business owner, was working between 2 different practices. He was both a massage therapist and an acupuncturist. Very, very talented. I mean, working 60, 70 hours a week, and I said, where is your self-care in there? Where do you get a massage? Where do you have acupuncture? Are you getting, are you getting enough nutritionally? Just asking him some basic questions about his own primary needs. Are you getting enough sleep? And he said, well, kind of. I said, kind of means no. In this case, it kind of means no. So we started looking at what was priority. What was priority, and where were behaviors that were thoughts and behaviors that were self-sabotaging him? And how do you put that personal practice of well-being in the mix? He was also, I did accountability with him, and he was also, missing a lot of commitments. So I said to him, it was like 2 weeks in a row. He had committed to things, and we get on our coaching session, and he had missed the mark. He had not completed his actions that he had committed to do. They weren't actions for me, they were actions for him. And so I said, all right, so this is the second week. Here's what I noticed. This is the second week that you had committed to some things that were about moving your business forward, and you didn't complete them. How do you want me to hold you accountable? So I put the responsibility in his hands about how he wanted me to hold him accountable. He went, wow, I hadn't thought about that. He said, well, here's what I want to do. Here's my 3 actions that I'm going to do in the next week. If I don't, and I know you're going to ask me about them in the next call. He said, if I don't complete those, then I pay you more money. He goes, I'm putting my money where my mouth is.
Wow.
I said, okay. I let him design what the consequences, so to speak, were. But I said, okay, that's great. It's, look a little deeper, look under the surface just a little bit more. What's it costing you? And not financial dollars, but what's it costing you by not keeping your word to yourself? Because there's something bigger here. And we looked through that. So I said, I'm rooting you on, check in with me during the week. I'm looking forward to hear how next week, when we talk next week, we get on the phone next week. I said, how'd it go? I said, here's the 3 actions you told me you'd do. He said, I did number 1, I did number 2, and number 3, I said, did you do it? He said, I did part of it. I said, well, let's think about what your commitment was. You said 100% of those 3. And he said, I did. He said, I didn't do it. I said, well, 1, good for you for owning that. 2, you're being honest about it. He said, and 3, I owe you more money. I said, okay. So he created his own accountability just by me asking the question, how do you want to be held accountable for this?
Yeah.
And he said, when I have to pay more money, that has a pain factor.
Mm-hmm.
And just circumstances don't necessarily have to cause pain, but it's about raising the awareness about when we commit to something, what happens when we do follow through on it, and what happens when we don't. And when we don't, how do we go back and handle it and clean it up?
Yes.
So that's a long answer to your question about, looking at how do you work with these things with entrepreneurs. That's one example. And those are some things to consider. As an entrepreneur, you've got a different kind of accountability, and one of them needs to be to yourself so that you stay in good form and you're well so you can pursue the dreams that you want to pursue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that a lot of entrepreneurs start out with good intentions and, they have a desire to have that self-care habit, but it somehow just gets waylaid and they end up, not being able to keep it up. So I love what you're saying about, having that consequence to the accountability. That's what you're helping provide for your clients, that, they understand, like, there is a consequence, and also, helping them see, like, the reward of staying committed to that goal and actually following through on their actions and being accountable.
Mm-hmm. And I have a coach. I work with coaches. A good coach is going to be worth their weight if they have their own coach. And at one point this year, I was working with 3 different coaches.
Really?
Yeah, I was. And one of them I worked with in the summer. We worked a lot on accountability and accountability and, with exercises, because I was working on some leadership things. And some of my own personal development. And I work with a coach so that I can be at my best for my clients. I walk my talk, and that's really, really important as a coach, to be coached as well, so you can be the client.
Yes.
As, at times, to know what it's like to be in the client's shoes and go through the process of developing as well.
I love that. And I think, even multimillionaires, from what I've heard, many very successful entrepreneurs, they still maintain their commitment to having a coach, because they understand it's a journey. You don't actually get to a certain destination and think you're done evolving, you're done growing. And there's just so much more to learn at any level you get to it.
Yeah.
Like, one thing I would love, we're going to wrap up here in just a couple minutes. What I would love, Susie, is if there's anything that people can do right after this broadcast just to really get started in setting themselves up for success. You know, maybe they woke up today and just didn't feel that motivated, didn't feel like, you know, taking on some of the harder tasks that they have to do this week. Maybe they've hit certain blocks, you know, all sorts of circumstances people are going through.
Right.
But what are some things that people could do right away? That's really the mission of this podcast, to help people put this into this practical advice into practice. So anything you have to offer to people.
Sure. Well, one is I just gave you a URL. Hire a coach, you know, or at minimum, do a complimentary coaching session with someone. And I have one that it's in the chat if you want to use it. I do a complimentary session with people because I want them to get a feel for coaching before they actually commit to working with a coach. And so they, you know, when somebody signs up with me for a complimentary session, they get a series of questions emailed to them, and then we schedule the call. So many coaches do a complimentary session, and it's a great time to get a taste of coaching and, you know, get some perspective on what's possible. The other thing is find an accountability partner. You know, I have a very, very good friend of 25 years that we used to, when I lived back east, she still lives there. Mm-hmm. We would walk every morning at a park 7 days a week. Every morning we would go walk. And she was my accountability partner for that form of exercise. Mm. So, you know, that we walked and we did some yoga together. But it was somebody that I could check in with every day. Somebody I trusted, somebody that could give me honest and authentic feedback. I could get perspective on things. I could gain new insights. And so find somebody that is, if you're working towards something that's really important to you, find an accountability partner and talk about what that accountability is going to look like, how it's going to work. Get an accountability partner.
Awesome.
Yeah, so work with a coach, find an accountability partner. I had one and it left my mind, but
yeah, okay.
Get sleep. 8 hours. And people go, oh, I do well on 5. Mm-hmm. Try 8 a night for a week. Really, sleep is so underrated. It's so important. And people, you know, they kind of pride themselves on, oh, I only get 3 hours a night and I can function. There's so much sleep deprivation, at least here in the United States, that people, you know, stay up late and don't get enough sleep. Get sleep. It makes a difference. I made a commitment. This is actually when I was in graduate school, and I went back to graduate school in my early 40s and I worked a full-time job and did an accelerated MBA program.
Wow.
And I was in class every Saturday and Tuesday night, and I was managing a several $1 million project and in my business life, and 8 hours, period.
Wow.
And I've kept that ever since. And it's absolutely critical to get enough adequate rest, because I did not function. And I don't care what people say. You don't function at your best unless you're adequately rested. So
I
get
totally
sleep.
agree. Yeah. I'm really glad you mentioned that, because there is really just a trend of, you know, being sleep deprived. And I just think it can lead to all sorts of disasters. And I don't know if you've read Ariana Huffington. You know,
I haven't read the book, but I'm familiar with it. And she writes about that.
Is really great. You know, that, I mean, she's a big proponent of the sleep revolution, you know, exactly what you're saying about, you know, helping people understand the detrimental effects of not having 8 hours of sleep, and really, you know, dropping the technology at night, because it's really affecting our level of focus. And yeah, I just think that we need to hear that over and over. So I'm really glad you mentioned that. One other thing that I thought of, and I could keep talking to you for hours, Susie, but
me too.
But I thought that it's worth mentioning what sparked when you were mentioning about people thinking they can get by on 5 hours of sleep. What that sparked in me was a thought about how people have bad time management habits, because we think that we have to stay up, till 2 in the morning and then, get that 5 hours of sleep. But I think that really, if a lot of entrepreneurs are looking at their time management, and that ties in with the accountability, I think, as well, because, if you start with that accountability and you say, well, I'm going to block out this time and that's what I'm going to get done, and you have someone you're accountable for, then you don't need to stay up until 2 in the morning. It's like, it's very interesting how, just setting ourselves up with a system and that, really just, tying it in with the importance of accountability. It's, it's
big, isn't it?
It's big.
Yeah, it really is. And, kind of looping back to the idea of harnessing your inner champion, look at a champion athlete. They have poise, but that comes from focus, commitment. And I can tell you from being an athlete, I didn't function well if I didn't get enough sleep.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, Susie. It's just been awesome having you here. And I really encourage everyone, I'm going to link up that URL so people can go and sign up for your complimentary session. And I really encourage everyone to do that. I know just through our conversation before this podcast, when we were introduced, I mean, it really, I don't think I actually told you, Susie, it really changed my day. I just felt your positivity and your, just level of getting people motivated. Like, you really love what you do. And I think that anyone who signs up for a complimentary session will have that experience of just being able to, get focused and be able to have a little bit more motivation.
Indeed. It's been a pleasure to talk with you, Sarah. And I'm the same. I could talk all afternoon with you. I know we've got a limited time, but it's been such an honor to talk with you and talk about coaching and talk about what's possible that we can have in our lives through any number of things around vision and accountability and taking care of ourselves.
Well, thank you. It really is an honor, because having someone like you talk about this topic is hopefully going to have a ripple effect. So I work with a lot of conscious entrepreneurs. Those conscious business owners are out there doing amazing things in the world. So you sharing this advice of, how they can harness their inner champion, that's only going to help them reach their mission. So thank you for your service. Thank you for what you're out there doing in the world. And again, I hope everyone goes and checks out Susie's website, and we will stay in touch, and we will also link up your social media.
Great.
So thanks, everyone, and we'll catch you again soon.
Thanks,
Thank
Sarah.
you. Bye.
Bye.